in the shadows where mirrors hold ancient secrets. These stories reveal mirrors as portals to nightmares, where reality blurs and protagonists confront their darkest fears. Brace yourself for a journey where every reflection may lead to terror beyond imagination.
Emily Carter sighed contentedly as she stepped onto the creaking wooden porch of her new home. The sprawling Victorian house, with its ivy-covered walls and overgrown garden, was a stark contrast to her cramped city apartment. She felt a sense of peace wash over her as she surveyed the quiet, fog-blanketed landscape of her aunt's property. The distant call of a crow added to the eerie charm of the place, making her feel as though she had stepped back in time. "Shadow, come on!" she called to her black cat, who was already exploring the porch. Shadow meowed and darted inside the house, his sleek form disappearing into the dim interior. Emily smiled and followed him, eager to begin unpacking and settling into her new life. As she explored the house, Emily marveled at the collection of antiques her aunt had amassed over the years. Each room held treasures from different eras, but it was the grand, ornate mirror in the living room that caught her eye. The mirror's gilded frame was intricately carved with strange symbols, and the glass seemed to shimmer with an unnatural light. "Wow," Emily whispered, reaching out to touch the mirror. Her fingers brushed against the cold surface, and for a moment, she thought she saw her reflection smile back at her, a twisted, malevolent grin. She jerked her hand away, heart pounding. "Just your imagination," she told herself, shaking her head. But as the days passed, the mirror continued to unsettle her. Every time she glanced at it, her reflection seemed to warp and distort, showing her a version of herself that was both terrifying and captivating. One evening, as Emily was working late on a design project, she heard a soft whisper. She looked up, her eyes drawn to the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, but it wasn't her face she saw. The eyes were too dark, the smile too cruel. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The reflection's lips moved, mimicking her words, but with a sinister twist. "I am you, Emily, the real you." Emily backed away, her heart racing. "No, you're not. You're just a figment of my imagination." The reflection laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the room. "You can't escape me. I am part of you, and soon I will be all of you." Terrified, Emily fled the room, but the haunting laughter followed her, echoing in her mind long after she had slammed the door shut. She knew she had to find out more about the mirror and the entity that seemed to inhabit it. The next day, she visited the local library, hoping to find some clues about the mirror's history. The librarian, Mrs. Thompson, was a kindly old woman who had lived in the town her entire life. When Emily described the mirror, Mrs. Thompson's face paled. That mirror belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a notorious witch who lived in this town centuries ago, Mrs. Thompson explained. She was said to have trapped a powerful demon in the mirror to gain its power, but it eventually consumed her. Many who have owned that mirror have met tragic ends. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Is there any way to get rid of it? Mrs. Thompson shook her head sadly. Many have tried, but the mirror always finds its way back. It feeds on fear and despair. The only way to defeat it is to face the darkness within yourself. Emily returned home, determined to confront the entity. She spent hours researching exorcisms and protective rituals, hoping to find something that could help her. But as the days turned into weeks, the entity's hold on her grew stronger. She found herself losing time, waking up in strange places with no memory of how she got there. Her friends stopped visiting, frightened by her erratic behavior. One night, as a storm raged outside, Emily stood before the mirror, her reflection sneering at her. "You can't win," it hissed. "You belong to me now." Summoning all her courage, Emily stared back at the twisted version of herself. "No, I won't let you take me." The reflection's eyes glowed with a malevolent light. "Then let the darkness consume you." Emily felt a surge of anger and fear, but she also felt a spark of defiance. She remembered Mrs. Thompson's words and realized that the only way to defeat the entity was to confront her own fears and insecurities. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer to the mirror, her eyes never leaving her reflection. "I am not afraid of you," she whispered, her voice steady. "You are a part of me, but you do not control me." The reflection's face twisted in rage, but Emily stood her ground. She felt a strange warmth spread through her, a light that seemed to emanate from within. The mirror began to crack, the glass splintering as the light grew brighter. "No!" the entity screamed, its voice echoing through the room. "You cannot defeat me!" But Emily's resolve did not waver. She reached out, touching the mirror one last time. The glass shattered, and a blinding light filled the room. When it faded, the mirror was gone, and Emily's reflection was once again her own. She sank to the floor, exhausted but victorious. The entity was gone, and she knew she had faced her darkest fears and emerged stronger. As she looked around the room, she felt a sense of peace and clarity she had never known before. Emily smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The house was no longer a place of fear, but a sanctuary where she could create and find inspiration. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them, knowing that she had the strength to overcome any darkness. The story of Emily and the haunted mirror is a reminder that we all have our own demons to face. The battle between light and darkness is one we must all fight, but it is a fight we can win if we have the courage to confront our fears and believe in our own strength. Daniel Hayes drove his dusty SUV up the winding mountain road, leaving behind the chaos of city life for the tranquil solitude of his late uncle's cabin. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows through the dense forest that surrounded him. As he pulled into the clearing where the cabin stood, a sense of peace washed over him. This was exactly what he needed to break his writer's block. The cabin itself was rustic yet inviting, its wooden beams weathered by years of mountain storms. Daniel unloaded his bags and began to settle in, unpacking his laptop and a few notebooks onto the worn wooden table in the living room. He glanced out the window at the breathtaking view of the mountains bathed in the golden light of sunset, feeling a surge of inspiration. After a simple dinner of canned soup, Daniel decided to explore the cabin further. He climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, where old trunks and forgotten furniture lay covered in dust. His flashlight beam danced across the room until it settled on an old ornate mirror tucked away in a corner. Intrigued, Daniel approached the mirror. Its frame was intricately carved with swirling patterns, and the glass surface gleamed despite years of neglect. He wiped away the dust with his sleeve and saw his reflection staring back at him, the dim attic light casting strange shadows across his face. As night fell and the cabin grew quiet, Daniel sat at the table, typing away at his novel. A soft creak echoed through the cabin, causing him to look up. His gaze drifted to the mirror in the corner of the room, and he froze. His reflection was smiling at him, but it wasn't his smile. It was too wide, too mocking. Daniel's heart raced as he watched his reflection move independently, raising its hand and waving at him with a sinister grin. "No," Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible over the rustling of leaves outside. He backed away from the mirror, but his reflection followed his every move, mimicking him perfectly. Over the next few nights, Daniel's unease grew. The reflection in the mirror began to change, its smile turning into a sneer, its eyes darkening with malice. It started to mimic his actions with unsettling precision, as if mocking his every thought and movement. Desperate for answers, Daniel ventured into town, seeking out the local historian who knew about the cabin's history. Mrs. Weaver, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a keen intellect, listened intently as Daniel described the mirror and its strange behavior. "Ah, you've encountered the doppelganger," Mrs. Weaver said solemnly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Legends say the mirror acts as a portal to a sinister dimension where a malevolent entity resides. It feeds on the fears and insecurities of those who gaze into it, creating a twisted reflection that seeks to take over its victim's life." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Is there a way to stop it?" Mrs. Weaver shook her head. "The doppelganger's power grows stronger with each passing night. You must confront it, Daniel. Confront your own fears and weaknesses, or it will consume you." Back at the cabin, Daniel stood before the mirror once more, his heart pounding in his chest. His doppelganger grinned back at him, its reflection shimmering with dark energy. "You can't escape me," the doppelganger whispered, its voice echoing in Daniel's mind. "I am you. I am your darkest fears." Daniel clenched his fists, steeling himself against the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. "No," he said firmly, his voice trembling but resolute. "You are not me. You are just a reflection." The doppelganger's grin widened, its eyes gleaming with malevolence. "We shall see." With a surge of courage, Daniel lunged forward, smashing the mirror with a heavy candlestick he had grabbed from the table. Shards of glass flew in all directions, and a deafening scream filled the room. When the dust settled, the mirror lay in pieces, its dark magic dissipating into the air. Daniel sank to the floor, breathing heavily, but relief washed over him. The doppelganger was gone, its hold on him broken. He knew the ordeal had changed him, but he also knew he had faced his deepest fears and emerged stronger. As dawn broke over the mountains, Daniel stood outside the cabin, watching the first rays of sunlight filter through the trees. The air was crisp and cool, filled with the sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves. He felt a sense of peace settle over him, knowing that he had conquered the darkness that had threatened to consume him. The story of Daniel and the malevolent mirror is a cautionary tale about confronting one's own fears and vulnerabilities. It explores the blurred lines between reality and illusion, and the power of courage and self-awareness to overcome darkness. Sarah Lawson stood in the spacious living room of her newly purchased apartment, marveling at the sleek, modern design and expansive views of the city below. It was a dream come true, a corner unit on the top floor of a newly renovated high-rise, a sanctuary from the hustle and bustle of her demanding career in advertising. As she unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, Sarah discovered an old, ornate mirror tucked away in the corner of the bedroom closet. Intrigued by its intricate carvings and antique charm, she decided to hang it in the living room, hoping it would add a touch of elegance to her new home. That night, as Sarah passed by the mirror, she caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of her eye. She turned to face her reflection, expecting to see herself, but what she saw sent a shiver down her spine. In the mirror, Sarah's reflection was not her own. Instead of her cheerful smile, the reflection showed her face contorted in fear, eyes wide with terror. She blinked, but the image remained, showing a dark and twisted version of herself. "No," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible in the silence of the apartment. She backed away from the mirror, heart racing. This can't be real. But night after night, the mirror continued to show disturbing visions. Sarah saw herself in horrific scenarios, falling from a skyscraper, trapped in a burning car, alone in a desolate wasteland. Each vision felt more vivid and terrifying than the last, driving her to the brink of madness. Desperate for answers, Sarah sought help from experts in antique artifacts and delved into the mirror's history. She learned that it was once owned by a reclusive mystic rumored to possess supernatural powers, including the ability to foresee the future. But the mirror had a darker side. It was said to trap the souls of those who gazed into it, showing them their worst fears and sealing their fate. As Sarah's obsession with the mirror grew, her friends and colleagues began to notice her changing behavior. She became withdrawn and paranoid, constantly haunted by the visions that tormented her day and night. Some urged her to get rid of the mirror, but Sarah couldn't tear herself away from the allure of uncovering its secrets. One evening, as she stood before the mirror, the vision showed her a scene she recognized. A dark alleyway, rain pouring down, and a figure lurking in the shadows. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she realized she was looking at her own future, a future she was determined to change. With renewed determination, Sarah confronted the mirror oracle, demanding answers. The reflection sneered back at her, its eyes gleaming with malice. "You cannot escape your fate," it whispered, its voice echoing in the quiet room. "I am your destiny." But Sarah refused to back down. With a surge of courage, she reached out and smashed the mirror with a heavy lamp. Shards of glass flew in all directions, and a chilling scream filled the air. When the dust settled, the mirror lay in pieces, its dark magic dissipating into the night. Sarah sank to her knees, trembling but victorious. She had faced her darkest fears and emerged stronger. The mirror's power was broken, and she knew she had reclaimed her future. As she looked around the now silent apartment, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. The city lights twinkled outside the window, a reminder of the vibrant life waiting for her beyond the shadows of the mirror. The story of Sarah and the Mirror Oracle is a chilling reminder of the power of fate and the resilience of the human spirit. It explores the fear of a predetermined future and the courage to defy it, offering a glimpse into the blurred lines between reality and illusion in a modern urban setting.
In the lingering silence where mirrors hold their secrets, these three harrowing tales have intertwined, each protagonist battling the malevolent forces lurking within their reflections. As the echoes of their encounters fade, the chilling truth remains. Mirrors are not mere reflections, but gateways to realms where reality bends and nightmares thrive. Beware the next time you catch your reflection's gaze, for beyond it may lie a darkness waiting to ensnare the unwary soul.